The trial chamber was enormous. Commander Cain stood in the center, surrounded by empty space on all sides. Above him, 7 aliens sat on floating platforms, each representing a different species from across the galaxy. Their eyes, some human-like and others completely foreign, all stared down at him with the same expression: judgment. Marcus kept his hands behind his back, standing straight despite the chains of light that bound his wrists. He had been a soldier once, then a diplomat. Now he was a criminal. Or so they said. The air smelled strange here, filtered and recycled 1,000 times. Station Kepler 9 was neutral ground where no single species held power. It made sense to hold the trial here. Everyone could pretend to be fair. Commander Cain of Earth, the head judge spoke. Her name was difficult for human tongues, so everyone called her the magistrate. She looked like a tall crystal formation, her body shifting through colors as she spoke. You stand accused of the destruction of Velthar, 300,000 souls lost, an entire sacred world burned. How do you answer? Marcus swallowed. His throat was dry. I did what I had to do. Gasps echoed through the chamber. In the viewing areas above, thousands watched from across the galaxy. This trial was being broadcast everywhere. Humans were still new to the galactic community, only 200 years since first contact. Many species still didn't trust them. Ambassador Zreth rose from his platform. He was Veltharian, one of the survivors. His serpentine body coiled around itself, scales shimmering red with anger. When he spoke, his voice hissed with barely controlled rage. You admit it then, Zreth said. You murdered my people, you destroyed our holiest place, and you feel no remorse. I didn't say that, Marcus replied quietly. His chest felt tight. Every night he saw their faces in his dreams. 300,000 people he couldn't save. I said I did what I had to do. There's a difference. The magistrate's crystal body flashed orange. Annoyance. Explain yourself, human. Marcus took a breath. There was a weapon on Velthar, an ancient one older than any of our civilizations. It was waking up. If it had activated fully, it would have destroyed 40 billion lives across 12 systems. I tried to warn the Veltharian government. For 3 days I sent messages, begged them to listen. They thought I was crazy. Lies, Zreth spat. We detected no such weapon. Because your sensors weren't looking for the right thing, Marcus said. His voice grew stronger now, desperate. It was precursor technology, from before any of us existed. I had 20 minutes before it fired. 20 minutes to make a choice. Let 40 billion die, or sacrifice 300,000 to disable it. Convenient, another judge said. This one was gaseous, a cloud of purple vapor that spoke through vibrations. No evidence remains of this weapon, only a destroyed world and your word. Dr. Sarah Chen stood beside Marcus. She was his advocate, a human woman who specialized in both ancient technology and galactic law. She stepped forward, her face pale, but determined. The evidence was destroyed in the explosion, Sarah said. But Commander Cain's service record speaks for itself. He has saved lives for 20 years. He has no history of violence or recklessness. Until now, the magistrate observed. A hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed Marcus's ship, the Horizon's Promise, firing massive beams of energy at Velthar's surface. Buildings exploded, cities burned. The footage went on for 3 minutes that felt like hours. Marcus watched it again, just like he had watched it 100 times since that day. He could see every detail, the way his hands had shaken when he gave the order, how his weapons officer had cried while pressing the firing button, the terrible silence on the bridge afterward. The sensor logs from that day show your ship alone near Velthar, another judge said. This one looked almost human, except for the silver skin and 3 eyes. No ancient weapon, no threat, just you attacking a defenseless world. The weapon's energy signature was masked, Marcus said. His voice was getting quieter now. He knew how this looked. He knew how impossible his story sounded. It was designed that way. The The precursors didn't want anyone to find their defense systems until it was too late. Defense systems? Zreth laughed bitterly. You expect us to believe the precursors placed a weapon on our homeworld? That we lived above it for 10,000 years and never knew? Yes, Marcus said simply, because that's exactly what happened. The magistrate's colors shifted to dark blue. Decision time. Commander Cain, you have offered no proof. No evidence. No witnesses. Only your word against the facts. Every sensor, every recording, every piece of data says you attacked Velthar without provocation. I'm telling the truth, Marcus said. He knew it was pointless. He had known from the beginning. But he had to try. Sarah put her hand on his shoulder. Her eyes were wet with tears she refused to let fall. Your Honors, I request more time to gather evidence. Let us investigate the precursor sites, find proof that these weapons exist. Denied, the magistrate said. This trial has gone on long enough. Humanity's newest commander comes to our civilization and commits genocide. Whether from malice or incompetence, it matters not. The Concordat must show that justice applies to all species equally. The 7 judges rose from their platforms. They gathered in a circle, speaking in languages Marcus couldn't understand. He watched them debate his fate, knowing what was coming. Finally, they returned to their positions. The magistrate spoke again, her voice echoing through the enormous chamber. Commander Marcus Cain of Earth, we find you guilty of 300,000 counts of murder, guilty of the destruction of a sacred world, guilty of crimes against the Galactic Concordat. Each word hit Marcus like a physical blow. Sarah grabbed his arm, steadying him. The sentence, the magistrate continued, is permanent exile in quantum stasis. You will be conscious but frozen, aware of every moment, for eternity. You will have an eternity to contemplate your crimes. Silence filled the chamber. Even Zreth looked uncomfortable. Quantum stasis was considered the worst punishment in the galaxy. Death was mercy compared to it. Marcus nodded slowly. I understand. Do you have any final words? The magistrate asked. Marcus looked up at the viewing areas where humans watched from Earth and the colonies. His family was there somewhere. His daughter who had just turned 15. His parents who had been so proud when he made commander. Don't blame Earth for this, he said. Don't blame humanity. This was my choice, my decision. Whatever I am, guilty or innocent, it's on me alone. Let us stay in the Concordat. Let us prove we belong here. The magistrate's colors softened slightly. Perhaps even she felt some pity. Take him to the chamber of final judgment. The sentence will be carried out immediately. Guards appeared, aliens in armor carrying weapons that hummed with energy. They surrounded Marcus and Sarah. One of them deactivated the light chains and replaced them with physical restraints. As they led him from the trial chamber, Marcus looked back once. Zreth was watching him, grief and satisfaction mixed on his alien face. The other judges were already leaving, moving on to other business. To them, this was just another case. Another criminal punished, but Marcus knew the truth. He had saved 40 billion lives, and no one would ever believe him. The walk to the chamber of final judgment felt both too long and too short. Sarah walked beside him, talking quietly about appeals and legal procedures, but Marcus barely heard her. His mind was racing, thinking about his daughter growing up without him, about dying alone in frozen time. The chamber doors opened ahead. Beyond them lay his eternity. The chamber of final judgment was older than the station around it. Much older. Marcus could feel it the moment he stepped inside. The walls were made of some dark material that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols covered every surface, written in languages that no living being could read. Sarah had to stay outside. Only the condemned, the judges, and the executioners were allowed in the chamber. She squeezed his hand once before the guards pulled him forward. I'll keep fighting, she whispered. I'll find proof. Marcus nodded, but they both knew it was over. The door sealed behind him with a sound like a tomb closing. The chamber was circular. In the center stood a platform surrounded by 7 pillars, each representing one of the judges. The magistrate and the others entered from different doors, taking their positions around the room. But what caught Marcus's attention was the object floating above the platform. It looked like a scale, the kind used to weigh things but impossibly beautiful. Gold and silver metals twisted together in patterns that hurt to look at for too long. Symbols crawled across its surface, glowing faintly. The two plates of the scale hung perfectly balanced in the air, supported by nothing. "The scales of Maat," the magistrate said. Her voice was softer here, almost reverent. 10,000 years ago our ancestors found this artifact drifting in space. No one knows who made it. Every attempt to study it has failed. It cannot be damaged, cannot be scanned, cannot be understood. Marcus stared at the scales. Something about them made his skin prickle. For as long as the Concordat has existed, another judge continued, the scales have been present at major judgments. They are tradition, a reminder that justice must be balanced. "Do they do anything?" Marcus asked. His voice echoed strangely in the chamber. The magistrate's colors shifted to something Marcus couldn't interpret. "They glow. When a judgment is correct, they glow brighter. When it is false, they dim. Or so the legends say. In recorded history, they have only ever glowed faintly, the same for every judgment. Some believe they are simply decorative. Others believe they are waiting. Waiting for what? No one knows. The guards led Marcus to the platform. He climbed the steps slowly, each one feeling heavier than the last. When he reached the top, he stood directly beneath the scales. They hung about 2 meters above his head, close enough to touch if he jumped. Zreth slithered closer to the platform. His red scales had dulled to a darker shade. Grief, Marcus realized. Under all the anger, the ambassador was drowning in grief. "For my people," Zreth said quietly. "For those who died. I want you to know I take no joy in this." Marcus met his eyes. "I know. If our positions were reversed, I might do the same. I'm sorry I couldn't save them all." Something flickered in Zreth's expression. Confusion, maybe, or doubt. But it was gone too quickly. The magistrate raised one crystalline arm. "Begin the procedure." Machines descended from the ceiling, surrounding Marcus with rings of light. He felt a tingling sensation across his skin. The quantum stasis field was forming, testing his biology, preparing to freeze him in a single moment that would stretch forever. Marcus closed his eyes. He thought of his daughter. He tried to remember her laugh, the way she used to run to him when he came home. He held on to that memory, knowing it would be all he had for eternity. "Marcus Cain," the magistrate intoned, "by the authority of the Galactic Concordat, you are hereby sentenced to—" Light exploded through the chamber. Marcus's eyes snapped open. The scales were glowing. Not the faint glow the magistrate had mentioned, but a brilliant golden radiance that filled the entire room. The symbols on their surface were moving, racing around in patterns too fast to follow. The machines around Marcus shut down. The quantum field collapsed. Alarms started blaring. "What's happening?" one of the judges shouted. The magistrate's crystal body flashed through a dozen colors Marcus had never seen before. "Impossible. The scales have never, they don't—" The light grew brighter. Marcus had to shield his eyes. He could hear the judges shouting, hear guards running, hear equipment failing all around him. But above it all, there was another sound. A humming that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, vibrating in his bones. Then the scales spoke. The voice was old. Not old like an elderly person, but ancient like mountains, like stars, like the universe itself. It spoke in a language Marcus shouldn't have understood, but somehow the meaning flowed directly into his mind. "Bearer of justice!" The chamber went silent. Everyone stood frozen, staring at the glowing artifact. "Innocent." Zreth made a sound like a wounded animal. No, that's not possible." The magistrate floated closer, her entire body white with shock. "In 10,000 years, the scales have never spoken. Never. This is... I don't..." Marcus was still standing on the platform, as confused as everyone else. He looked up at the scales, at the golden light washing over him. "I don't understand." "What's happening?" The humming grew louder. Then the light changed, forming shapes in the air. Images. Memories. But they weren't Marcus's memories. The chamber filled with visions of the past. Everyone in the room could see them, perfect and clear. Marcus watched himself in the horizon's promise, 3 days before the destruction of Velthar. He was younger in the memory, less worn down by grief and guilt. The vision showed him discovering strange energy readings from the planet. Showed him scanning deeper, finding something that shouldn't exist, and massive structure buried beneath Velthar's oldest temple, built from materials that predated all known civilizations. By God, the vision Marcus whispered, it's a weapon, a planet killer. The vision shifted. It showed Marcus sending message after message to Veltharian authorities, begging them to evacuate the temple, warning them about the energy building up. The responses came back dismissive, annoyed. One official accused him of trying to interrupt their holy festival with paranoid fantasies. The visions continued. Hour by hour, the scales showed everything. Marcus calculating trajectories, realizing the weapon would fire at nearby inhabited systems. 40 billion people in its path. Marcus trying to board a shuttle to the surface, being denied landing permission. Marcus contacting his superiors on Earth, who told him to stand down and let the Veltharians handle their own planet. Then came the final day. The weapon's energy signature spiked. 20 minutes until firing. Marcus pacing his bridge, trying to think of another way. Any other way? Sir, his weapons officer said in the vision. She was crying. If we fire on the temple's power core, we can cause a controlled collapse. It would disable the weapon before it reaches critical mass. How many casualties? Vision Marcus asked. The festival is happening. 300,000 people in the area, maybe more. Vision Marcus closed his eyes. His hands were shaking. And if we don't? 40 billion dead across 12 systems, including Velthar itself. The vision showed Marcus sitting in his command chair for what felt like hours but was only minutes. Showed him trying one last time to contact anyone who would listen. Showed him pulling up pictures of his daughter, his parents, knowing they were in the weapon's firing path back on Earth. Charge weapons, he finally said. His voice was broken. Target the temple's power core, prepare for surgical strike. Sir, I'll take full responsibility. This is my order, my decision, no one else's. The vision showed the firing, showed Marcus watching the screen as 300,000 life signs vanished. Showed him in his quarters afterward, head in his hands, weeping. Showed him writing his confession and surrender, knowing he would be blamed, knowing no one would believe the truth. I'm sorry, Vision Marcus whispered to the empty room. I'm so sorry. The visions faded. The scale's light dimmed to a soft glow. The chamber was silent except for someone crying. Marcus looked around and realized it was Zreth. The Veltharian ambassador was curled on the ground, his body shaking. He tried to warn us. The weapon would have killed us all anyway. He saved us, and we called him a murderer. The magistrate's colors had gone completely clear, transparent. Marcus had never seen that before and didn't know what it meant. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. The scales have rendered judgment. In 10,000 years of silence, they have spoken for this human. She turned to Marcus. You are innocent. Marcus felt his legs give out. He sat down hard on the platform, everything hitting him at once. Relief, vindication, grief for those he couldn't save. It was too much. What happens now, he asked. The emergency session of the High Council happened within hours. This time the chamber was packed. Representatives from every species in the Concordat had arrived, summoned by news that spread faster than light through the communication networks. The scales had spoken. After 10,000 years of silence, the ancient artifact had chosen a human. Marcus sat in a different position now. Not as a criminal in the center, but as a witness to one side. Sarah stood next to him, her face still showing shock and relief. She kept glancing at him like she was afraid he might disappear. The scales floated at the center of the chamber now, brought up from the execution room below. They still glowed with that soft golden light, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Every few seconds, symbols would race across their surface and fade away. The magistrate called the session to order. Her crystal body was still mostly transparent, as if the shock had drained her of color. We are here to understand what has occurred. The scales of Maat, silent for all recorded history, have declared Commander Cain innocent and named him something in an ancient language we barely comprehend. Bearer of justice, murmurs filled the chamber. Marcus could see the doubt on many faces. Some species looked curious. Others looked angry. A few looked afraid. Ambassador Zreth stood up. He looked different now, smaller somehow. His scales had lost their angry red color, fading to a dull gray. I was wrong, he said clearly. Everyone stopped talking. I accused an innocent man. Commander Cain tried to save my people, and we ignored him. The weapon would have destroyed us all. He sacrificed 300,000 to save billions. I was blind with grief, and I called it murder. The chamber erupted in noise. Arguments broke out between different species. Some praised Zreth's honesty. Others claimed the visions could have been faked, that humans had somehow tricked the scales. How do we know this is real? A judge demanded. This one was insectoid with multiple eyes on stalks. How do we know the human didn't tamper with the artifact? We couldn't tamper with it if we tried, Sarah spoke up. All eyes turned to her. The scales resist every analysis. Every scan. We've tried to study them for centuries and learned nothing. They exist outside our understanding of physics. No species has that technology. Then how did they show us those visions? Another voice asked. As if answering the question, the scales began to glow brighter. The humming sound returned, and suddenly that ancient voice filled everyone's minds again. This time it didn't speak in short phrases. It spoke in complete thoughts directly into their consciousness. Marcus heard it like everyone else. The voice explained things his mind struggled to understand, but the meaning was clear. The scales were created by the precursors, a civilization so old that even their ruins had turned to dust. The precursors had watched younger species rise and fall, had seen empires built on justice and others built on tyranny. Before they disappeared, they left behind safeguards, tools to help younger civilizations find their way. The scales were one such tool. They didn't just measure guilt or innocence. They measured something deeper, the capacity for true justice, the ability to make the hard choice, the right choice, even when it cost everything. For millions of years, the scales had watched, observed, waited for beings worthy of a title the precursors had created. Bearer of justice. Someone who could see truth clearly, who would act on it regardless of personal cost, who understood that justice sometimes demanded terrible sacrifices. In all that time, only 3 beings had earned the title. The last was 40,000 years ago, from a species now extinct. Marcus was the 4th, the first human, the first in longer than most civilizations had existed. The voice continued. It showed them more than just Cain's story. It showed them the pattern. How every major galactic conflict started with small injustices ignored. How the Concordat itself had grown corrupt, more concerned with politics than truth. How they had nearly executed an innocent man because it was easier than admitting they were wrong. The scales were disappointed in them. That emotion came through clearly. They had expected better. When the voice faded, the chamber was silent for a long time. Marcus felt like he'd been hit by a truck. His mind was reeling from the information, from the weight of what the scales had said. What does it mean? The magistrate finally asked. She was speaking to the scales directly now. What is a bearer of justice supposed to do? The scales glowed again, but this time the answer was simpler. Images appeared in the air, showing Marcus traveling the galaxy, investigating crimes, uncovering truths, standing between the innocent and those who would harm them. The scales would guide him, show him reality beneath the lies. You want him to be a judge? A council member asked, confused. One man with the power to override our courts? The answer was both yes and no. Marcus felt the meaning flow into his mind. The bearer of justice wasn't meant to replace their laws. He was meant to handle the cases they couldn't solve, the mysteries that politics twisted, the situations where the truth was buried so deep that normal investigations failed. He would answer only to cosmic law, to the ancient principles of justice itself, and he could refuse. The scales made that clear. Marcus Cain could walk away, return to Earth, live his life. They had given him the title because he was worthy, but being worthy didn't mean being forced. Everyone looked at Marcus. He sat there feeling the weight of all those eyes. Part of him wanted to refuse. He wanted to go home, hold his daughter, be normal again. After everything he'd been through, didn't he deserve peace? But another part of him, The part that had made the choice at Velthar knew he wouldn't walk away. 300,000 people had died because he did the right thing. He owed it to them to keep doing right things. To make sure their sacrifice meant something. "I'll do it," Marcus said quietly. "But I need help. I'm not a detective. I'm not even that good a diplomat." "I'll help," Sarah said immediately. "You'll need someone who understands galactic law and ancient technology." Zreth rose slowly. "I will help as well. I owe you a debt that can never be repaid. Let me serve justice alongside you. Let me honor my people's memory by ensuring no one else suffers from the same blindness." The magistrate's colors began to return, faint but present. "The Concordat will support this, we must. The scales have shown us our failures. Perhaps a bearer of justice is what we need." She paused. "But Commander Cain, you understand this will be difficult? Many will resent your authority. Many will try to stop you." "I know," Marcus said. "But the scales chose me for a reason. I've already made the hardest choice I'll ever have to make. Everything else will be easier by comparison." That wasn't entirely true, and everyone knew it, but it sounded good. Over the next hours, they worked out details. Marcus would have a ship, a crew, access to Concordat resources. The scales would bond to him somehow, appear when he needed them. He could call on any authority in the Concordat for assistance, though whether they'd actually help was another question. Marcus stood before the scales again. Up close, he could see the intricate patterns in the metal, the way the symbols seemed to exist in more dimensions than should be possible. "I don't know if I deserve this," he said softly. "I don't feel special. I just did what anyone would do." The scales pulsed warmly. A feeling washed over Marcus, and he understood it without words. That was exactly the point. The greatest acts of justice came from people who didn't see themselves as heroes, who simply saw what was right and did it regardless of cost. The scales began to shrink. Marcus watched in amazement as they folded in on themselves, compressing down and down until they were small enough to fit in his palm. They floated down and settled into his hand, warm but not burning. The moment he touched them, knowledge flooded his mind. Not complete understanding, but enough. He knew how to summon them, how to ask them for help, how to see through deceptions and find truth. The scales were bound to him now until he died or passed them on to another worthy bearer. Sarah was staring. "That's incredible." "It's heavy," Marcus said. "Not physically heavy. The scales weighed almost nothing. But the responsibility, the duty, the expectations, those weighed more than any chains." He closed his fist around the scales. They faded from view, not disappearing but becoming invisible, tucked into whatever strange pocket of reality the precursors had created. He could still feel them there, a gentle presence in the back of his mind. "What now?" Zreth asked. Marcus looked at him, then at Sarah, then at the council members watching from above. "Now we start working. There's a galaxy full of people who need the truth. Let's go find it for them." The chamber erupted in applause from some sections, angry shouts from others. Marcus ignored both. He walked toward the exit, Sarah and Zreth following. His new life had just begun and he had no idea where it would lead. But for the first time since Velthar, he felt like he could breathe again. 6 months had passed since Marcus became the bearer of justice. His ship, the Truth Seeker, felt more like home now than his apartment on Earth ever had. Sarah had designed the living spaces to be comfortable for multiple species. Zreth had his heat lamps. Sarah had her laboratory. Marcus had a small room with pictures of his daughter and a window that showed the stars. They had solved 17 cases in those 6 months. Each one taught Marcus something new about the scales, about justice, about the galaxy he thought he understood. The first case had been simple. A merchant accused of stealing medical supplies from a colony. The local authorities had video evidence, witness testimony, everything. But when Marcus summoned the scales, they showed the truth. The merchant's business partner had framed him, stealing the supplies herself to sell on the black market while the merchant took the blame. The second case was harder. A research station destroyed, 30 scientists dead. Everyone blamed equipment failure, but something felt wrong. The scales showed Marcus that one scientist had discovered something dangerous, something that powerful people wanted buried. They had sabotaged the station to hide their secret. It took 3 weeks to gather enough evidence that even without the scales, courts could convict them. By the 5th case, word had spread. People started requesting his help. Messages came from across the galaxy. Some were genuine pleas for help. Others were traps set by those who resented his authority. Now Marcus stood on the bridge of the Truth Seeker, reading the latest request. A colony world called Haven's Rest was tearing itself apart. One community accused another of genocide, claiming they had poisoned the water supply and killed 5,000 people. Tensions were so high that civil war seemed inevitable. "What do you think?" Sarah asked. She was studying sensor readings of the planet below. "I think someone's lying," Marcus said, "but I don't know who yet." Sreth slithered onto the bridge, his scales a calm blue now. He had changed over the months, the grief becoming something quieter, more focused. "The local government is requesting we stay away. They say they can handle it internally." "They said that 3 weeks ago," Sarah pointed out. "Now they've got armed militias forming on both sides." Marcus made the decision. "Take us down. We're not asking permission." The landing was tense. Armed guards surrounded their ship the moment they touched down. A local official, looking exhausted and angry, met them at the ramp. "We didn't invite you," she said. "This is an internal matter." Marcus showed her the symbol the Concordat had given him, marking him as bearer of justice. "Justice doesn't wait for invitations. 5,000 people are dead. More will die if we don't find the truth." The official looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Marcus's eyes made her reconsider. "Fine, but don't make this worse." The investigation took 2 days. Marcus visited both communities, talked to survivors, examined the water supply. The evidence all pointed to the accused community. They had access to the poison. They had motive, an old land dispute. They had opportunity, but the scales wouldn't glow. Marcus would hold them in his hand, focus on the accused leaders, and the scales remained dark. That meant something was wrong with the story. On the second night, Sarah made a breakthrough. She was analyzing the poison itself, trying to trace its origin. "Marcus, this doesn't make sense. This poison is synthetic, really advanced. Neither community has the technology to make this." "Could they have bought it?" Sreth asked. "Maybe, but look at this." Sarah pulled up a molecular analysis. The isotope signature matches chemicals from off-world. Specifically, from a corporation that wants to mine this planet. Marcus felt something click in his mind. The mining rights. "The colonial charter says both communities have to agree before any outside company can mine here. But if one community was wiped out and the other was blamed," Sarah continued, "the survivors would be arrested or exiled, the land would be declared empty, available for corporate use." They found the truth buried in financial records and secret communications. A mining corporation had poisoned the water, framed one community for it, and planned to let them destroy each other. After both sides were too weak to resist, the corporation would move in and claim the land. Marcus called a public meeting. Both communities came armed and angry, ready to fight. He stood between them with the scales floating above his hand, glowing bright enough to light the gathering darkness. "You've both been manipulated," he said. His voice carried across the crowd. "Neither of you killed those people. A corporation did because dead colonists are easier to remove than living ones." He showed them the evidence. The scales projected images into the air, just as they had at his trial. Financial transfers, secret meetings, messages between corporate executives planning the genocide. The anger in the crowd shifted targets. By morning, both communities were working together to demand justice. The corporation tried to deny everything, but Marcus had already sent the evidence to the Concordat. Arrest warrants were issued. The CEO and 14 executives were taken into custody. 5,000 people were still dead. Marcus couldn't bring them back, but he could make sure their deaths meant something, that justice was served. As they left Haven's Rest, Sarah came to find him in his quarters. He was staring at the pictures of his daughter again. "You did good down there," Sarah said. "Did I? 5,000 people died because greedy people wanted profit. I stopped it from getting worse, but I didn't prevent it. You can't be everywhere, Marcus." "I know. That's what bothers me." Over the next months, the cases kept coming. a weapons dealer selling faulty equipment that killed soldiers, a politician framing his rival for corruption to win an election, a religious leader using fear to control his followers and hide his crimes. Each case was different, but Marcus started to see patterns. The galaxy was broken in small ways that added up to something larger. People lied, they cheated, they hurt each other for power, for money, for revenge. The Concordat tried to maintain order, but politics and bureaucracy slowed everything down. Marcus, with the scales to show him truth, could cut through all of that. It made him effective. It also made him enemies. The assassination attempts started after the 4th month. The first was a bomb on his ship, found by Sarah before it could detonate. The second was a sniper on a space station, stopped by Zreth's quick reflexes. The third was poison in his food, detected by the scales warning him with a sharp pulse of heat. "Someone really doesn't like you," Sarah said after the poison incident. "Lot of someone's," Marcus replied. "Every person we've put away has friends, family, business partners who lost money. Zreth was running security checks on everything now. I've also detected something else. Surveillance, not just criminals watching you. Official surveillance from within the Concordat itself." That bothered Marcus more than the assassination attempts. "You think someone in the government wants me gone?" "I think we've exposed corruption in several high places. Some of those people still have friends in power." Sarah had been quiet, working on her datapad. Now she looked up, her face pale. "There's something else. I've been studying the precursor sites we've visited. Remember how the scales showed you that ancient weapon on Velthar? Hard to forget. Well, I've been checking records. In the last year, 7 other precursor sites have shown unusual energy readings. Not weapons activating, but something waking up, something responding to signals." Marcus felt a chill. "What kind of signals?" "Unknown. But Marcus, the precursors built the scales to find bearers of justice. They built weapons as safeguards. Why would they need safeguards? What were they afraid of?" That question haunted Marcus for weeks. He kept working, kept solving cases, but part of his mind was always on Sarah's question. The scales had more knowledge locked inside them, he could feel it. Information they hadn't shared yet. Then came the night the scales woke him up. Marcus jerked awake in his quarters, heart pounding. The scales were glowing bright red, pulsing urgently. They floated out of their invisible pocket and hovered in front of his face. Images flooded his mind. Not the controlled visions the scales usually showed, but something desperate, urgent. He saw the edge of the galaxy, where civilized space ended and the dark regions began. He saw something emerging from that darkness. Ships, but not like any ships he'd ever seen. They moved wrong, existed wrong, like they were more holes in reality than actual objects. The scales showed him more. Ancient battles. The precursors fighting this enemy, losing, retreating. The enemy consuming worlds, leaving nothing but void behind. The precursors building their safeguards, their artifacts, leaving them for younger species to find. Because the enemy was coming back. Marcus ran to the bridge in his sleep clothes, still barefoot. Sarah and Zreth were already there, looking at sensor readings. "Something's wrong," Sarah said the moment she saw him. "Multiple precursor sites across the galaxy just activated simultaneously. I'm getting emergency broadcasts from dozens of systems." "The Void Collective," Marcus said. The name had come from the scales, ancient and full of dread. "They're here." Zreth's scales turned almost black. "Who are the Void Collective?" Marcus told them what the scales had shown him. An enemy from outside the galaxy, from the space between galaxies where reality grew thin. The ones who had destroyed the precursors. The reason the precursors had left all their artifacts behind. They're coming back. The first colony disappeared on a Tuesday. One moment it was there, 16 million souls on a mining world called Outer Edge. The next moment the planet was silent. Not destroyed, just empty. When scouts arrived, they found buildings intact, machines still running, food half-eaten on tables. But every living thing was gone, leaving only a strange darkness that seemed to absorb light. By Friday, 3 more colonies had vanished. Then a space station. Then an entire fleet of cargo ships. The pattern was clear. Something was moving through the galaxy's edge, consuming everything in its path and moving inward toward the core worlds. Marcus stood in the emergency council session on Kepler 9. The chamber was chaos. Representatives screamed at each other, blaming everyone but themselves. Some called it a natural disaster. Others claimed it was a weapon from a rival species. A few accused the humans of bringing this horror to the galaxy. Silence. The magistrate's voice cut through the noise. She had turned completely black, a color Marcus had learned meant extreme stress. "Bearer of justice, you claim to know what this is?" Marcus summoned the scales. They appeared above his hand, glowing red with urgency. The Void Collective. They exist in the space between galaxies where physics work differently. They don't just kill civilizations. They erase them, consume them, turn them into more void. "How do you know this?" an insectoid representative demanded. The scales showed me. The precursors fought them millions of years ago and lost. That's why the precursors disappeared. They weren't wiped out by war or disaster. They were erased by the Void Collective. Fear rippled through the chamber. The precursors had been godlike in their technology. If they couldn't win, what chance did younger species have? "Then we're doomed," someone said quietly. "No." Marcus's voice was firm. "The precursors left us weapons, safeguards, all those artifacts scattered across the galaxy. They're not just decoration or mystery. They're a defense network, but they need to be activated. They need to work together." The magistrate leaned forward. "How do we activate them?" "Bearers of justice," Marcus said. "The scales told me I'm not the only one. There are others. Other artifacts waiting for worthy beings to claim them. We need to find them fast." "You want us to trust in ancient legends?" a gaseous representative asked. "To hope that magical artifacts will save us?" "I want you to prepare your defenses while I do what the precursors designed me to do," Marcus shot back. The Void Collective moves slowly, but they're accelerating. We have maybe 2 months before they reach core systems. 2 months to build a defense or watch the galaxy die. The magistrate's colors shifted rapidly. Finally, she settled on a deep blue. "The Concordat authorizes whatever resources you need, Bearer Cain. But I must ask, why you? Why did the scales choose a human for this?" Marcus had wondered the same thing. But as he held the scales, feeling their warmth and ancient wisdom, he understood. Because humans are good at one thing. We don't give up. We face impossible situations and find a way through them anyway. The precursors needed someone stubborn enough to keep fighting even when losing seemed certain. "Then go," the magistrate said. "Find your bearers. Wake the artifacts. Give us a chance to survive." The next weeks were a blur. Marcus, Sarah, and Zreth traveled to precursor sites across the galaxy. The scales guided them to artifacts that were humming with new energy, responding to the approaching threat. On a frozen moon, they found the shield of Aegis. It chose a warrior from a species of living stone, a soldier who had sacrificed her entire unit to save a civilian population. She became the bearer of protection. In a nebula, they found the lens of truth. It bonded with a scientist who had destroyed his life's work when he discovered it could be weaponized. He became the bearer of knowledge. A desert planet held the chains of mercy. They selected a judge who had resigned rather than sentence an innocent person, even though it ended her career. She became the bearer of redemption. One by one, the bearers gathered. Each brought their artifact, their species, their skills. Marcus found himself leading them not through authority but through shared purpose. They were all people who had made hard choices for the right reasons. Meanwhile, the Void Collective kept advancing. More worlds disappeared. The military forces of every species in the Concordat mobilized, but conventional weapons were useless. Ships that engaged the Void vessels simply vanished, absorbed into the darkness. Sarah worked day and night, studying the artifacts and how they connected. "It's a network," she explained. "Each artifact is a node. When they work together, they create something bigger. A field that the Void Collective can't penetrate." "How do we activate it?" the bearer of protection asked. "We need all the artifacts in one place," Sarah said, "and we need something to power them." Something immense. Marcus looked at the scales. They pulsed warmly, and knowledge flowed into his mind. "The Concordat station. The one we're on now, Kepler 9. It's built around an old precursor structure. That's not an accident. This was meant to be the anchor point." Zreth was coordinating with military forces. "The Void Collective is 3 days from here. If we're going to make a stand, we need to do it soon." Marcus made the call. Every bearer brought their artifact to Kepler 9. Every military ship in range took up defensive positions. Civilians evacuated to inner systems. The station itself became a fortress, the last line of defense before the void reached the heart of galactic civilization. Marcus stood in the old chamber beneath Kepler 9, the same chamber where he had almost been executed. Now it held 7 bearers and their artifacts. The scales floated in the center, connecting to each artifact with threads of golden light. When we activate this, the bearer of knowledge said, it will drain us. The artifacts draw power from our life force. How much? Asked the bearer of redemption. Unknown. Possibly everything. Marcus looked at the others. Each one nodded slowly. They had all made sacrifices before. They could do it again. If this works, Marcus said, the field should push back the void, give us time to figure out a permanent solution. And if it doesn't work, Sarith asked from the doorway, then at least we died trying to do what was right. The Void Collective arrived ahead of schedule. Sensors showed them as tiers in space itself, moving through the galaxy like holes in fabric. They consumed everything they touched. Matter, energy, even light simply ceased to exist in their presence. The defense fleet engaged first. Brave ships from 100 species fired every weapon they had. Most did nothing. A few, equipped with experimental precursor-based technology, managed to slow the void down. It wasn't enough. Marcus watched from the chamber as the void approached the station. Time to act. Activate the artifacts, he said. The bearers focused their will through their artifacts. Marcus felt the scales grow hot in his hands, drawing on his life force. Energy flowed between all 7 artifacts, creating a web of light that expanded outward from the station. The pain was incredible. Marcus felt like his soul was being pulled out through his skin. Around him, the other bearers cried out, their bodies glowing as the artifacts drained them. But it was working. The field expanded, a sphere of golden light that pushed against the darkness. Where they touched, the void recoiled. The tiers in space began to close. More power, the bearer of protection shouted. We need to push them back completely. Marcus gritted his teeth and gave everything he had. His vision blurred. His heart felt like it might stop. But he pushed harder, thinking of his daughter, of Sarah and Zreth, of all the people counting on him. The golden field exploded outward, expanding faster than light. It swept across the sector, pushing the void back toward the galaxy's edge. The Void Collective fought against it, trying to tear through, but the combined power of the artifacts was too much. For the first time in millions of years, the void retreated. Marcus collapsed. Around him, the other bearers fell as well, their energy spent. The artifacts dimmed but remained active, maintaining the field at a lower level. Sarah and Zreth rushed in. Don't you die on me, Sarah said, checking his pulse. Not after all this. Marcus managed a weak smile. Not planning to. Just need a nap. Maybe a year-long one. The victory was real but temporary. The field would hold for now, giving the galaxy time to prepare. The void wasn't destroyed, just pushed back. It would return eventually, and they needed to be ready. But for the first time, the galaxy had hope. The precursor artifacts worked. The bearers of justice had proven that unity and sacrifice could stand against the darkness. Recovery took weeks. When Marcus finally felt strong enough to walk, he found the Concordat had changed. Species that had barely tolerated each other were working together. The threat of the void had forced them to see past old hatreds and prejudices. The magistrate visited him in the medical bay. Her colors were bright again, almost cheerful. The council has voted. We're creating the Order of the Scales, a permanent organization of bearers, dedicated to protecting the galaxy from threats both internal and external. I'm not sure I'm the right person to lead that, Marcus said. You already are leading it. You brought the bearers together,